1:14 a.m. Leshan Radar Station, Hsiung County, Taiwan. Altitude 2,862 meters. The AN/FPS-115 PAVE PAWS phased array radar at Leshan has been operational since 2013. It is not a Taiwanese system. It is a United States Air Force system, operated jointly. Its data fed directly into the U.S. missile warning architecture through a dedicated fiber link to the INDOPACOM data network. The radar sees 3,000 kilometers in every direction, into Fujian Province, across the East China Sea, over the Korean Peninsula. When a ballistic missile leaves a Chinese launcher in Shandong or Fujian, Leshan sees it before SBIRS does its certain trajectories. It is the most strategically valuable sensor asset on the island of Taiwan. The plan has known this for 11 years. The targeting study for the Leshan facility had first appeared in Eastern Theater Command planning documents in 2013. The same year, the PAVE PAWS radar became operational. For 11 years, plan operational planners had been building a solution to one problem: how to neutralize the most strategically valuable sensor on Taiwan without triggering an immediate kinetic escalation. A direct missile strike was possible but would cross every threshold simultaneously. It would be unambiguous, it would be attributed instantly, and it would trigger the U.S.-Taiwan Relations Act in a way that left no diplomatic space. The plan needed something that looked, for long enough, like a technical failure. The cyber-physical hybrid operation was the answer. The firmware exploit created plausible ambiguity. In the first minutes of a radar processing failure, the responsible party is not obvious. Equipment fails, software corrupts. By the time the exploit was definitively attributed, the physical team would have reached the target and the ambiguity would no longer matter. The physical damage would be real. The attribution would be certain. But the 72-hour window would already be open. 14 months of development. The firmware exploit had been tested against a captured PAVE PAWS maintenance terminal, acquired through a third-country intermediary. The physical operation had been rehearsed 7 times against a mock-up of the Leshan facility's external infrastructure, built in a coastal training area in Zhejiang Province. The Type 11 high-speed craft crews had practiced the approach profile 41 times. Everything that could be tested had been tested. At 1:14 a.m., the Leshan radar station's Network Operations Center registers an anomaly in its fiber uplink to the INDOPACOM data relay. Not a failure, a degradation. Bandwidth reduced by 34% over 90 seconds, in a pattern inconsistent with physical link damage and consistent with deliberate traffic manipulation at a relay node. The duty network engineer logs the anomaly and initiates a diagnostic. The diagnostic takes 4 minutes. During those 4 minutes, the manipulation progresses. At 1:18 a.m., the PAVE PAWS radar's primary data processing system receives a firmware update through the compromised uplink. The update is not authorized. It does not appear as an update. It appears as a routine synchronization packet, the kind that flows through the uplink every 6 hours as part of standard system maintenance. The malicious payload inside the synchronization packet executes at 1:18 a.m. It overwrites 3 parameters in the radar's target classification algorithm, specifically the parameters that determine whether a return is classified as a valid track or as clutter. After the overwrite, the radar continues operating. It continues sweeping. It continues producing returns. It produces nothing that its processing system classifies as a valid track. The PAVE PAWS radar at Leshan is not offline. It is blind, and it does not know it. The duty operator at the Leshan Operations Center notices nothing at 1:19 a.m. The display shows the radar as fully operational, sweep active, processing active, link active. The link is active. The data flowing through it is no longer meaningful. She will not know this for 11 minutes, when the secondary diagnostic cycle runs and flags the processing anomaly. 11 minutes of blindness. In the operational context about to unfold, 11 minutes is the window the plan has been calculating for. At 1:16 a.m., 2 minutes before the firmware exploit executed, A PLAN Maritime Special Operations Force element of 14 personnel aboard 2 Type 11 high-speed infiltration craft departed the frigate CNS Yancheng, positioned in international waters 41 kilometers northeast of the Diaoyutai Islands. Their heading: the northeastern coast of Taiwan. Their target: the Leshan radar facility's external power distribution node and fiber junction point, the physical infrastructure that connects the PAVE PAWS radar to the national grid and to the INDOPACOM data relay. The maritime approach time: 37 minutes. The cyber operation and the physical operation were designed to work in sequence. The cyber exploit eliminated the radar's ability to report valid tracks, creating a window of sensor blindness. The physical team would arrive in that window and disable the external infrastructure, converting a temporary software-induced blindness into a sustained physical outage that would take days to repair. By the time Taiwan's technicians identified the firmware exploit, the fiber junction and power distribution node would be physically compromised. The radar would be down for 72 to 96 hours minimum, and in those 72 to 96 hours, Eastern Theater Command's operational planners had a window they had been designing around for 14 months. The calculation was precise. The execution was not. The RC-135V/W rivet joint, operating 280 kilometers northeast of Taiwan on a standard SIGINT patrol of the East China Sea, registered the Type 11 high-speed craft departure from the CNS Yancheng at 1:16 a.m. The thermal signatures of the high-performance outboard engines were distinct, a characteristic signature the RC-135's operators had catalogued from previous PLAN Maritime SOF exercises. The contact report reached INDOPACOM at 1:17 a.m. Possible plan: Maritime SOF element, bearing 241 from Diaoyutai, speed 38 knots, trajectory consistent with Taiwan northeastern coast. At 1:18 a.m., the same minute the firmware exploit executed at Leshan, USCYBERCOM's Taiwan Network Monitoring Cell registered the anomalous traffic pattern on the PAVE PAWS uplink. Not the exploit itself, the traffic signature that preceded it. A synchronization packet with a non-standard checksum structure, arriving through a relay node that had shown elevated latency for the previous 6 minutes. The monitoring cell flagged it possible intrusion attempt at 1:18 a.m. and notified the Leshan Operations Center. The Leshan duty network engineer received the USCYBERCOM notification at 1:19 a.m., 1 minute after the exploit executed. She immediately initiated a full system integrity check. The integrity check takes 9 minutes to complete. She did not wait for it. At 1:20 a.m., she manually isolated the primary data processing system from the uplink and initiated a rollback to the last verified firmware state, a procedure that takes 6 minutes to complete and requires supervisor authorization. She called her supervisor at 1:20 a.m. He authorized the rollback at 1:20 a.m., the same minute she called. He had been awake since 1:14 a.m. when he noticed the bandwidth anomaly on his remote monitoring display at his quarters 400 meters from the operations center. He had not called because the anomaly was within tolerance. He was awake and watching when the USCYBERCOM notification arrived. He authorized the rollback in 11 seconds. The rollback completed at 1:26 a.m. The PAVE PAWS radar's target classification algorithm was restored to its verified state. The radar began producing valid tracks at 1:26 a.m., 12 minutes after the exploit executed. 12 minutes of blindness instead of the 11-minute window the plan had calculated, because the rollback itself added 1 minute beyond the plan's model. But the PLAN SOF element was still coming. 37 minutes from departure, they were 25 minutes away at 1:16 a.m. At 1:26 a.m., when the radar restored, they were 16 minutes away. And the radar being restored did not stop 14 PLAN Marines in 2 high-speed boats from closing at 38 knots on the northeastern coast of Taiwan. The E-2D Hawkeye, operating over the East China Sea at 27,000 feet, had been redirected toward the contact bearing at 1:19 a.m., 3 minutes after the RC-135 contact report. Its APY-9 radar acquired the two Type 11 craft at 1:21 a.m. at 34 kilometers, confirming the contact at 38 knots on a heading that resolved to the coastal area 14 kilometers south of Suao Naval Base on Taiwan's northeastern coast. At 1:22 a.m., INDOPACOM activated Operation Granite Seal, the contingency response to a planned special operations infiltration attempt against the Leshan facility. The operation had two components. Component 1, interception of the infiltration craft before beach landing. Component 2, identification and engagement of the command asset directing the operation, the CNS Yancheng, still in international waters 41 kilometers northeast of the Diaoyu Tai Islands. The CNS Yancheng was a Type 054A frigate, a 4,000-ton warship with HHQ-16 air defense missiles, a 76mm main gun, and U-8 anti-submarine torpedoes. She was in international waters. She had fired no weapons. She had not crossed any recognized line. Her presence was legally unassailable. She had also launched 14 armed personnel in an infiltration craft toward the territory of a U.S. treaty partner. That launch had occurred at 1:16 a.m. INDOPACOM's legal authority to engage the CNS Yancheng was not ambiguous. The infiltration of Taiwan's sovereign territory by PLAN forces, regardless of whether those forces had yet reached the shore, constituted an act of force under the U.S.-Taiwan Relations Act and the Mutual Defense Framework. The engagement authority was confirmed at 1:24 a.m. Component 1 activated first. Two ROC Navy Tuo Chiang class corvettes, Suao Naval Base, 14 kilometers north of the projected landing zone, had been at increased readiness since the RC-135 contact report. They cleared the harbor at 01:23 a.m. and turned southeast at 32 knots. They had Hsiung Feng II anti-ship missiles and a 76mm gun. Their intercept geometry, the Type 11 craft, were 22 kilometers from the projected landing zone at 1:23 a.m., closing at 38 knots. The corvettes were 14 kilometers from the landing zone, closing at 32 knots from a different bearing. The intercept point, calculated by the E-2D's tactical picture, was approximately 8 kilometers offshore in 5 minutes. The Type 11 craft were fast. They were not faster than radio. At 1:24 a.m., the Tuo Chiang commanding officer transmitted on the International Maritime Emergency Frequency. Unidentified high-speed craft bearing 047. You are approaching Taiwan territorial waters. Halt immediately and identify yourself. No response. The Type 11 craft continued at 38 knots. At 1:26 a.m., the same minute the PAVE PAWS radar restored, the lead Tuo Chiang fired 2 warning shots from her 76mm gun, rounds impacting the water 200 meters ahead of the lead Type 11. The Type 11 altered course 15 degrees to starboard and maintained speed. The maneuver was consistent with an attempt to go around the corvette's intercept geometry, not with compliance. At 1:27 a.m., the lead Tuo Chiang fired a Hsiung Feng II at minimum range, 8 kilometers, at the lead Type 11. The Type 11 attempted an evasive turn. The Hsiung Feng II's active radar seeker at minimum range had a clean lock on an 11-meter aluminum hull doing 38 knots with a large wake. Impact at 1:27 a.m. The lead Type 11 was non-operational. 7 PLAN SOF personnel were in the water. The second Type 11 turned hard northwest at maximum speed, away from the coast, away from the corvettes, attempting to reach international waters before the second Tuo Chiang completed its intercept geometry. It was 4.3 kilometers from international waters at 1:27 a.m., moving at 38 knots. The second Tuo Chiang was 6.1 kilometers away on an intercept bearing. The geometry favored the Type 11. The E-2D Hawkeye did not allow the geometry to run its course. At 1:28 a.m., it transmitted the Type 11's track and heading to two F-16Vs that had launched from Hualien Air Base at 1:23 a.m. The F-16Vs were 90 kilometers away. They closed at Mach 1.4. At 1:31 a.m., the lead F-16V was 6 kilometers behind the Type 11 and descending for a gun run. The Type 11 was 600 meters from international waters. The gun run produced 2 bursts of 20mm fire on the Type 11's wake. Warning shots, deliberately long, but precise enough to bracket the boat. The Type 11 commander understood the geometry. He stopped the boat at 1:31 a.m., 340 meters inside Taiwanese territorial waters, and transmitted on the emergency frequency. 7 personnel require rescue. Not engaging, requesting medical assistance. Both Type 11 craft were secured by the Tuo Chiang corvettes by 1:38 a.m. 7 personnel recovered from the water. 7 from the second craft secured aboard the corvette. 14 PLAN SOF personnel in ROC Navy custody. None had reached shore. None had reached the Leshan facility's external infrastructure. The firmware rollback had already completed 8 minutes before they were stopped. The Leshan PAVE PAWS radar was producing valid tracks. The blindness window had lasted 12 minutes. The physical backup was neutralized before it arrived. Component 2 activated at 1:29 a.m., while the second Type 11 was still attempting to reach international waters. The CNS Yancheng had been tracked continuously since 1:16 a.m. by the E-2D and by USS Chafee, positioned 180 kilometers to the east. When the Granite Seal Engagement Authority was confirmed at 1:24 a.m., USS Chafee had already computed a Harpoon Block 2+ fire solution on the CNS Yancheng. The solution was confirmed at 1:24 a.m. and held. The commanding officer of USS Chafee awaited the final INDOPACOM release authority, which arrived at 1:29 a.m. 4 Harpoon Block 2+ launched from USS Chafee at 1:29 a.m. Flight time to the CNS Yancheng, 14 minutes. The CNS Yancheng detected the Harpoon radar signatures at 1:36 a.m., 7 minutes after launch, 7 minutes before impact. She activated her HHQ-16 air defense system and fired 4 missiles in the next 90 seconds. HHQ-16 in terminal mode against a Harpoon Block 2+ sea skimmer at 14 meters altitude. 2 intercepts. 2 Harpoon rounds reached their terminal phase. 1 impacted the CNS Yancheng's hangar deck at 1:43 a.m. 165-kilogram warhead, contact fuse, penetrating the hangar structure and detonating inside. The hangar was non-operational. The Z-9 helicopter inside was non-operational. The CNS Yancheng's propulsion was undamaged. She was listing 3.1 degrees to starboard from flooding through the hangar structure's lower deck penetration. The second Harpoon impacted the CNS Yancheng's main gun mount at 1:43 a.m. The mount was rendered non-operational. The CNS Yancheng was afloat. She was capable of 16 knots on 1 engine plant. She was no longer capable of offensive operations. She transmitted a distress call at 1:44 a.m. and began moving northwest toward PRC waters at 16 knots. She was tracked by the E-2D until she crossed into PRC claimed waters at 2:11 a.m. She was not re-engaged. At 1:47 a.m., INDOPACOM transmitted a formal diplomatic notification to Beijing through the Crisis Communications Channel. The PLAN Maritime SOF infiltration attempt against Taiwan's sovereign territory had been intercepted. 14 PLAN personnel were in ROC custody. The CNS Yancheng had been engaged as the directing platform for the infiltration operation. No further engagement was planned if no further hostile action was initiated. Beijing's response, transmitted at 2:09 a.m. The personnel aboard the Type 11 craft were engaged in a routine maritime exercise. The ROC Navy's use of force was an unprovoked attack on PRC military vessels in international waters. The Harpoon strike on the CNS Yancheng was an act of aggression. The PRC reserved the right to respond. The Leshan PAVE PAWS radar, which had been tracking normally since 1:26 a.m., was tracking the PRC response at 2:09 a.m., the same as it tracked everything else. Its display showed no new launch signatures from Fujian or Shandong, no TEL vehicles activating, no H-6 bombers departing their bases. The window the PLAN had calculated, 72 to 96 hours of PAVE PAWS blindness enabling a broader operational sequence, was closed. It had been open for 12 minutes. 12 minutes of compromised firmware in a radar that was the most strategically valuable sensor on the island of Taiwan. 12 minutes. Reversed by a duty network engineer who called her supervisor before running the full diagnostic. And a supervisor who authorized the rollback in 11 seconds because he had already been awake and watching for 46 minutes before she called. The plan's 11-minute window calculation had been correct. Their assessment of how quickly the firmware anomaly would be identified had not been. The model assumed detection at the secondary diagnostic cycle. 9 minutes after execution. Detection had come at the primary notification cycle. 1 minute after execution, because USCYBERCOM's monitoring had flagged the anomalous traffic pattern before the exploit completed. 1 minute versus 9 minutes. 8 minutes of difference. In those 8 minutes, the rollback was initiated, authorized, and completed before the physical team could have reached the Leshan facility, even if they had not been intercepted. The plan operation had been layered, precise, and correctly sequenced. Its flaw was not in the sequencing. It was in the assumption that the network it was attacking was being watched only from the inside. It was being watched from the outside as well. It had been watched from the outside for 7 months. From the ROC 135 contact report at 1:17 a.m. to the CNS Yancheng entering PRC claimed waters at 2:11 a.m. 54 minutes. Plan Maritime SOF personnel, 14. In ROC custody, 14. Injuries, 7 personnel from the water recovery, assessed minor hypothermia. None reached shore. PAVE PAWS, radar, online and producing valid tracks from 1:26 a.m. Total blindness window, 12 minutes. CNS Yancheng, non-operational main gun, non-operational hangar deck and helicopter, listing 3.1 degrees, reduced to 16 knots. Withdrew to PRC waters, not further engaged. US and ROC assets, 0 injuries, 2 ROC Tuo Chiang corvettes, and 2 F-16Vs employed without damage. USS Chafee, 4 Harpoon rounds expended. Cost of US and ROC response munitions, 1 Hsiung Feng II anti-ship missile, 4 Harpoon Block 2+, total approximately $6.8 million. Assessed cost of PLAN assets neutralized CNS Yancheng partial combat capability, $340 million vessel with significant structural damage. 14 SOF personnel and 2 Type 11 infiltration craft. The plan's operational model had required 72 to 96 hours of PAVE PAWS blindness. It received 12 minutes. The physical backup for those 72 hours was neutralized 9 minutes before it would have reached the target. The command ship directing both operations was non-operational within 29 minutes of authorizing the infiltration. The PAVE PAWS radar continued tracking. At 2:14 a.m., it acquired a routine commercial flight departing Taipei Taoyuan International Airport on a scheduled service to Tokyo. The track registered as expected, classified correctly, and scrolled off the display as the aircraft climbed above the radar's optimal coverage altitude. Normal. Expected. Classified correctly. That was what 12 minutes of blindness and 54 minutes of response had preserved. Not a dramatic moment. A radar doing its job. Seeing what it was supposed to see. Reporting what it was supposed to report. The most strategically valuable sensor on the island of Taiwan, operational and uncompromised, at 2:14 a.m. The machine that had fought to keep it that way was already standing down. The E-2D was resuming its standard patrol track. USS Chafee was turning east. The ROC corvettes were returning to Swa Harbor with 14 passengers who had not expected to be passengers tonight. The radar tracked the Tokyo flight until it left coverage range. Then it tracked the next one.